Now recently I've been reflecting on what I want to get out of the Oxvlog project, and in doing so I have been thinking about what sort of questions I would have had for someone else doing the project, say 3 years ago, when I was in the process of deciding which university I wanted to go to and what I wanted to study, and so on. And I have to say, one of the things that really stood out for me, the question that was at the forefront of my mind when I was considering applying, was the one that this video is titled, "Is Oxford for state school students?" Now, I know some of you may think that this is a particularly controversial or maybe even pointless or ridiculous title, but as I said, it was a question that could really make or break my decision of whether or not I applied to Oxford or Cambridge while I was in sixth form. Now, before I express any sort of opinions on this topic, I should probably just tell any of you who don't already know a bit about my background. I grew up in southeast London and went to 2 state comprehensives, neither of which were particularly great. They were certainly no Eton or Westminster. They were generally sort of average GCSEs or slightly below average, and we would always sort of try and just scrape by whenever Ofsted came in. So I'm certainly not one of the more privileged students at Oxford. And I have to say, this was something that I was very aware of when I was thinking of applying here. There are so many sort of traditions, things that I've talked about before, and you know, sometimes I worry that in my videos, when I talk about things like matriculation and subfusc and use words like pidge and so on, words that are completely meaningless to anyone outside the bubble, that I create the feeling that I had when I was applying, and that is that feeling of, this place isn't for me, that I could never really fit in here, because I was used to what was a fairly average, quite basic and quite frankly dull life before I got here. And so it was so easy for me to look at Oxford from a distance and to think, that's not for me. An Oxford or Cambridge education is the prerogative of a wealthy elite. And it's quite amusing, because now I look back on it and I see just how ridiculous that was. I see how that impression was created, but now I see just how wrong I was in assuming that Oxford wasn't for me. I won't lie, it is a world apart from my education prior to Oxford. There are tremendous differences, and there's a lot more that can be done. I mean, Oxford is, I think, on average about 50% private school and 50% state school students, and that in itself is quite shocking, considering that only 7% of students are actually independently educated before they enter higher education. The lack of diversity in Oxford is something that always also gets to me. I went to a school, particularly coming from London, that was very racially diverse, and then coming here and seeing that it's all relatively homogenous is something that is saddening. I also won't lie and say that there isn't a lot of wealth and privilege and at times excess in Oxford, because there is, and that's just a fact. But I would say that that is more of a rarity, and on the whole, all of the positives that I've derived from accepting an education at Oxford have vastly and dramatically outstripped all of those negatives that I've just listed. When I came here, I had what was, in hindsight, quite a ludicrous notion about friendship groups that would form. I thought it would be very much a case of two discrete groups of state school students and privately educated students who didn't really have much in common. Now I see just how absurd that was, because your educational background is something that is very rarely mentioned. In fact, I think the only reason people actually know about my state school background is because I don't stop banging on about it in these videos. And so it does become something that is very irrelevant, as does your A-level results. I don't think I've ever told anyone what I got in my A-levels. Your parents' university education or your parents' careers, you know, the sort of area that you live in, none of these things are really discussed. And so I suppose to sort of wrap up, what I'm really trying to get across in this video is, in answer to the question, is Oxford for state school students? I would say, well, no, but it's not for independently educated students either. You get into Oxford on the basis of educational merit, and while you could argue that that is to some extent influenced by your background, it's something that Oxford does take into account and is always considering solutions to. So, as I've said what feels like 100 times before in my previous videos, if this is something that is a genuine worry or concern, please do reconsider, because if that is you, then that is very much what I was like 3 or so years ago, and yet here I am, in spite of having what was quite a rough first term, and in spite of being ill through quite a lot of my time here at Oxford, even during this term. Every day I love it more and more, and I really wouldn't choose to be anywhere else. So I hope this video hasn't seemed too repetitive and has been of some use to you guys. As ever, questions and comments below. I will endeavour to get back of them in spite of a very significant workload. Thanks for watching, guys.